Hey, what's happening, everybody? It's me, Robert Phoenix, and I am back here on the case. Let me just put this up there. There we go. All right. How's it going? Yeah, we have a little bit of an interesting background here, don't we, tonight? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's part of tonight's theme, which is the new tribalism in astrology. And I'm going to get into it tonight. Welcome to another edition of 15 Minutes of Flame. We'll keep this on for a while because I think it's kind of interesting. These are the faces of the future that are looking back at you. And there's a method to this madness. And at some point, I'll probably just replace this with a regular screenshot. But for now, take it in and I'll get into why you're staring at them and why they're staring back at you. Let me go over to Twitter, and I'll let people on Twitter know what we're doing over here, because sometimes they do need a bit of a nudge. I'm spending most of my time tonight trying to find connections between Stu Peters and the military-industrial complex. Which has been interesting. I had some interesting finds. I'll bring them up tomorrow. I think that's what I'll do. I'll bring them up tomorrow. We got it live going on here. Can I see myself? Yep. I certainly can. That means it's happening. Okay. Let me go over to Twitter and I'll ditch this visual. Just go over to Twitter and let them know that we're live now. One of these days, I want to do a show inside of like an auditorium with a bunch of us, like a live show, a live one of these with a bunch of people together in the same room. Wouldn't that be cool? With guests. Wouldn't that be great? Be a lot of fun. All right, here we go. Okay. I'm going to do that. If what is it? At least 15 people have been killed after an L-410 plane crashed in the Tatarstan region of Russia. All right, a little Tartaria thing going on there. Okay. Yeah, I think what I want to do. I'm not sure when I'm going to do it though. If we're still around in the springtime. Look at my hair. It's all kind of fucked up tonight. All right, it is what it is. I'm kind of raw tonight. You know, I've slept a lot this weekend, which is pretty rare for me. I slept, I think I slept, I think I slept close to 13 hours last night. And then on Friday night, I think I slept about another 11 or 12 hours. That's really huge. I never usually sleep that much. But every now and then, you know, you gotta jump in. Oh, look who's here. Look who's here. It's the Witch's Delight. My little familiar, Rosie. She looks like she's got a mask on, doesn't she? She's all masked up. But I would love to do that. If we're still traveling around this country, this great country, in the springtime, I'm gonna do a tour. I'm definitely gonna do a tour. I'm gonna do tour stops, and I'm gonna cruise around, and I'm gonna do live events, and then we can all get together in a place and hang out. And I'll try to have at least one guest per place, so I can do some interviews and we can do some astrology. and just have a hell of a good time. Wouldn't that be fun? Because I know a lot of you would like to come to Texas, but you just can't get away, and it's just going to get harder. I mean, the stuff that's going on with the airlines and Southwest, which we'll cover tonight as a big Mercury retrograde moment. We'll get into that tonight. It's just going to get harder and harder to travel. And I'd like to do something sooner than spring, but I think the weather is going to get like pretty weird. So who knows? It might have to be even an underground kind of tour at some point in time. You know what I mean? Like I may have to show up and we may have to be really covert about it. Let's hope not. Okay, welcome to another edition of Sunday Night AstroLive. I'm Robert Phoenix. I'm your host and your guide for the next couple of hours. And tonight we will be looking at the new tribalism as it relates to astrology, which is one of the reasons why I have these lovely faces that are beaming at you from the virtual projector in the back of your mind. And I'm going to tell you what they're about. I'm going to tell you how they relate to astrology and why it matters. But before I do that, let me go into the chat section here. And let's see who is present and accounted for. All right, we got Susie Gemini. She's here. Lisa Kolashinsky. You think this is my favorite shirt? Oh, you're funny. This is a Rhodesian shirt right here. This is a Rhodesian shirt. Right there. This was an ad. This was an ad for a recruiting poster in Rhodesia. I do like this shirt. I do like it. You're right, Lisa. Okay, let's see. Who do we have here? Beep, 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 beep. There she is, the lovely and talented Janus. JR, what's happening, JR? Good to see you. And we got JJ. Speaking of JJ, we got JS, JRJ. This is right here. This is a JJ Rain de Blanc creation right there. Got it on the old right finger right there. You see that? Right there. Boom. Got a little bit of delay here, I think, on YouTube, but it's right there. Anyway, if you're interested in stuff like this, go check out her website. And I follow her on Twitter. So it's now living on my right finger. That's pretty cool. Susie Gemini, we gave you a little shout out. What's going on, Sony? There's my man Robin. What's going on? Nancy Harding of the Harding Girl. She's here. Renee, K Pasa, Thomas Jordan. Be seeing you soon. There's Cheryl. Cheryl, you put the tour idea in my head, by the way, when you met up with my friends Ibrahim and Kimberly back in Maryland. You put the tour idea in my head. Whimsical Farm Girl. What's going on? Mark Galloway. Hello, Mark. Let's see. Kathy. Hi, Kathy. I hope you know. There's my man, Steve, Mr. Thor by the door. Lepetius. What's going on there, Rocks? Nice to see you. The Magical Catacorn. Would have loved to have seen you this coming Friday, but it's going to happen one of these days. Daniel M. Hello, Daniel. Taffy. Hello, Taffy. Good to see you. What an interesting chart Taffy has, by the way. Joe Mama. Going to me. Just listen. Joe, you're still packing? Man. Okay. Elizabeth W's here. CC, what's going on, Fran? Good to see you. Nancy Dickerson. Lisa K. We talked about Lisa K a little bit there already. How many people dies in the last second? I don't know. Marianne Smith coming in from the 415. Rest is crucial. Sometimes I forget how crucial it is, honestly. Let's see. Who else do we have? June Haygood. June, you can find my videos at 15 minutes of Flame. That's ovflame.com. Come to Oregon. You can do an event on my farm. All right, we could do that. There's a lot of people in Oregon. I'll do something in the springtime. I will do a spring tour. The moving backdrop is giving me a headache. I may just have to listen. Oh, I'll change it in a bit. What's going on, Benito? We'll be seeing you. G to G, Gucci to Goats is here. I hope those faces are not the new Manson gang. I'm going to tell you what those new faces are all about. Let's see. The backdrop is making my brain hurt. It's supposed to. That's what it's actually supposed to do. Believe it or not. Believe it or not. Jeff Peters. Miranda Couch. Mary hosted Julie Wallen. Nice. We had a little mini event touring the area. Love Julie. She's super cool. Let's see. Who else do we have here? April Himmel. Fuck Joe Biden. Go Brandon. Right? Go Brandon. Okay, so I just wanted to give you a sense of that backdrop for a second. The image. Oh yeah, you like it too, don't you? It's making your head hurt? No, you like it. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to swap it out. I think it's kind of cool, but I'm going to swap it out here. What? We're gonna do just a regular old screenshot, and it'll just be static. Okay, I'll take it easy on you guys. There we go. How's that? It's easy. We got a screenshot there. Easy. Now you can look at it without having your brain melt. Jasper, should we make you tribalized? Huh? Should we make you all tribaled up? I don't think so. You're unmistakable. Okay, so what are these faces all about? And what do they have to do with astrology? That's a very good question. And I'm about to answer it. But before we do, why don't we have our invocation here, which is what we do on Sunday nights and Monday through Thursday, sometimes Friday. Friday, I just get into it with a guest. I don't always know how the guest feels about these things. So we just go ahead and do it. Anyway, here we go. Ready? You want to do it with me? All right. Dear blessed and holy Mother, Father God of the great central sun within the universal light, which is the light of Yeshua, Sananda, Emmanuel, we ask that only the highest and best wisdom, information, and truth come through this channel at this time. And in so doing, we affirm and decree that the qualities of clarity and comprehension, constitution, creativity, cooperation, coherence, conviction, courage, comedy, and above all, love come through at this time. And we affirm and decree that any karmic residue be cleansed, purified, clarified, and removed from the stream. There it is. Thank you. Now, that image, that moving image, should be, at this point in time, static. Am I right? Are we in staticville now? Have we assumed static proportion? Let me just check. I don't want you guys to get all like seizured out, get an epileptic seizure. Okay. So what are these faces and why am I highlighting them? These are the faces of the new London Underground. This is what the youth of London, and it's spreading to other areas. This is what they are doing to avoid being recognized by surveillance and artificial intelligence. This is their way of hacking the system, which I think is interesting. Now, One of the reasons why we think that they were requiring masks during the time of, well, the time of COVID is because we're in a different time now. I mean, theoretically, it's still that, but it feels like we're in some kind of a very strange postscript, because it's not about that anymore. It's about something else. But we're on YouTube here, so we're going to choose and parse our words carefully, meticulously. But during the early days of the lockdown, people were, of course, wearing masks, and they were outside doing things, even though they were told to stay home and to make sure that they were taking one for the team. Basically locking down for 2 weeks to slow the spread. Well, a lot of people didn't do that or couldn't do that, so they had to go about their business, and they had to go about their business wearing masks. So this is something that Emily Moyer and myself talked about on one of our shows. And we talked about how AI was focusing on other characteristics and not just what's on your face. The AI was focusing on things like your shoulder width, your gait, the distance between your forehead and your chin, things like that. So that there would be biometric characteristics that they could file away, and then those biometric characteristics would become part of your marker. You also have heat signature markers, energy signature markers as well. But I find this really fascinating, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to evade and avoid artificial intelligence in surveillance. And it's not just how they're looking, it's also apparently how they're moving. They're not moving in straight lines, right? Because they know that AI and surveillance has figured out the whole gait pattern. So they're moving and doing things in unusual manners. Like, they're not moving straight ahead all the time. They'll move, they'll cut, they'll go at angles, right? They'll do things so that the AI does not have a clear fix on their patterns. Sometimes they will even exaggerate part of their walk or their movement. Like, for instance, they may have one shoulder up and another shoulder down. They may drag one leg. They may skip. There's a lot of different things that they'll do in order to break the rhythm and the pattern of AI and surveillance. So this is a really interesting development. And what it reminds me of in a lot of ways is that it reminds me of the face paint that was around during the New Romantic movement in England, circa 1979, roughly 1979, 1980. And let me give you an example of that. So we have, let's give you an idea what that looks like. You can begin to see some of the facial characteristics. They're somewhat similar in terms of their makeup, right? You have Adam Ant, Steve Strange, who was with Visage, and you have the sort of the half black and half white. And you have, if I'm not mistaken, this might even be Boy George, but this kind of face painting was not out of Boy George here. This was certainly not out of fashion during the New Romantic period. And you can see again, I mean, a lot of the costumery and the masquerade is very, very similar in some ways as to what's taking place now in London. You can see here's Adam Ant, who's probably the most famous in terms of applying some of this, right? Do this. And then here we go, sort of more New Romanticism. Here we go again. I think that's Steve Strange from Visage. You get the picture. I mean, they're altering their faces in a fairly pronounced way, just like these people, these young people, but they're for different reasons. And obviously, the reason that the New Romantics were doing that was because they were highlighting sort of this kind of post-glam effect that was highlighted by this kind of futuristic sort of infusion into the culture with synthesizers. And even somebody like Gary Newman sort of begins to fall into that post-glam, new romantic, electronic sort of world. Like this, the first Visage record is amazing, by the way. But these people, these young people, they're not doing it as a musical statement. They're doing it because they believe that their individuality and their survival depends on it. So one of the things that I've been talking about with astrology, and I've been talking about it in the last few shows that I've done. Yesterday, I did a little less than an hour with Clyde Lewis. He's got a thing called Weird TV. And I was on there for a little less than an hour, and I talked about some of this. And one of the things that we can learn from the final degrees of a sign, going from one sign to another, which is what I've been talking about for the last few weeks, because we're getting ready to move on. We're getting ready to move on from this Gemini, Sagittarius, true node, south node, into the true node and Taurus and south node and Scorpio. That's a big part of the story for the coming year. And you can see here that these faces begin to morph into this idea of Taurus and this modern tribalism. Because when we think of Taurus, we think of the earth, we think of groups and communities and traditions that are associated with the earth. And the way that they have painted their faces is in direct result of technology. So this is not just an interesting way to keep technology at bay, but it's also an anti-technology kind of statement. I don't know what music these people listen to. I don't know if this is a movement. I mean, who knows? Maybe they just listen to fucking Harry Styles. I don't know. But it's interesting because it's a trend. It is a fashion survival trend that is emerging as a result of not wanting to be under the all-seeing eye of artificial intelligence and surveillance. And it's coinciding with this wave of the true node in Taurus starting to come in and the true node in Gemini starting to exit. You see what I mean? We're starting to get signs now of where all this is headed. And to me, this is positive. I see this as being very, very positive. Number one, they're doing something that is proactive. Like they don't want, whether or not they can have their signature energy signatures read or whatever, that's beside the point. And let's say, for instance, 10 to 15% of the technology on the planet can do that, because that's a pretty high, that is a pretty high, pretty advanced technology. And let's say that 85% of the technology on the planet can't do that. But even if part of it was deployed in London, and this was even semi-successful, it's more about the expression than perhaps even the practical application. I like the idea of the practical application. They're starting to make people not do this, right? They're starting to get, like, hey, you really shouldn't be doing, making your face look like this in order to make sure that the all-seeing eye, or the CCTV cams in London can't track what you're doing and where you're going. But I like the feeling of it, right? Because it's bonding them. It's bonding them in a ritualistic sort of way where their goal is to remain as anonymous and as private as possible. And these are Gen Z kids, by the way. I love Gen Z. I think they're great. So to me, this is a hint of the new tribalism, because that's coming. And when we swept through this true node in Gemini, and there was, oh my God, just all these crazy reflections, refractions, fractalizations, atomizations, doubles, twins, clones. I mean, this period has been fraught with, a kind of central nervous system overload. I mean, it's interesting. Don't get me wrong. It's interesting. And we've been thrown into this Janus Ritual, which I talked about on Clyde's show. And I talked about the Janus Ritual back, I think it was like last summer when I was over in the other place. It might have been like really early in the summer, like maybe July or something like that of 2020. We started talking about this Janus Ritual where you're forced to put on a mask. And then after a certain period of time, right, you're supposed to take the mask off. And when you take the mask off, you are a different person. Something has occurred between the mask on and the mask off. And of course, the two masks are the masks of tragedy and comedia. Tragedy and comedia. The happy face and then the not so happy face. Those are the two masks of the Janus Ritual. And the idea of the Janus Ritual is that these events would take place during a war. So theoretically, we are in a war. And the centerpiece of the Janus Ritual would have an opening here and an opening over here. And then you would go in one door and you would have one mask. And then when you would leave the other door or the other gate, you would have another mask, or the mask would be off, one of the two. But you would not be the same as when you went through one versus the other. And really, if you look at sort of the heat of the Janus Ritual, it really starts at around May 26th, which is the month of Gemini. And what is that? 5 days away from June. June being related to Juno, May, June. June also the sign of Gemini being related to Juno. And Juno being the youngest of the asteroids. And on May 26th, if I'm not mistaken, that's when the George Floyd event happens in Minneapolis, the Twin Cities, which we've talked about before. So the mask, when we put the mask on, when some people did, I didn't, but when people put the mask on, which was on 3/11, which is a Piscean date, again, duality, people put the mask on. And then on May 25th, 26th, we had the George Floyd event, which was the catalyst that would change, theoretically, America. And the statuary related to America would come down. But those things, those symbols were part of the Janus Ritual. So that on the other side of the Janus Ritual, which was January 6th in 2021, the mask would come off and America would be different. And of course, America was different at that time. We had Joe Biden as our president on January 6th. That was the end of the Janus Ritual. And there was supposedly this new guard and this new way of being, that the revolution was complete. And they even had a fake revolution on the steps of the Capitol. That was all fake revolution. That was all part of the Janus Ritual. You had people there that were wearing masks. Antifa throughout the entire summer wore masks. You had people at that January 6th event who were not who they purported to be. They were wearing masks. The Q shaman, who, by the way, is a bull and relates to the coming true node in Taurus, was also wearing a mask. So we had a lot of masked participants. Whatever happened to Ashley Babbitt, and I'm not going to talk about that here in this channel. The person who theoretically shot her, and I say theoretically, was wearing a mask. So now we have all these other individuals who, again, are theoretically wearing masks. You know, we have masked Biden, masked Fauci, masked Pelosi. We have masked, what's her name? Kamala Harris. I've even seen Trump with something that looked like a mask. So it's not just the people on the left, there are people on the right that look like they're wearing masks. So this whole idea of this Janus ritual has another kind of chapter to it, because one part of it is ended, right? Started really in 311. We have the Floyd event, which takes place during Gemini. That's when everything changes. There's a war in America. The statues come down. You've got all these, corporate creeps taking a knee like they've surrendered. Then you have the Christian creeps who decided they wanted to take it. By the way, I like Christians. Don't get me wrong. I think Christians are good people, but you don't get on your fucking knee. Not like that. Not for that. Trust me. You don't get on your knee for that. But that was the imagery. The imagery was that people were getting on their knees, and that's a sign of capitulation and surrender. The revolution, the theatrical revolution, was definitely televised. The real revolution isn't being televised, and I've been talking about that for a long time. So again, January 6th, that's the end, right? Because it's Janus, January. And then we have this new thing that happens theoretically with Biden. However, the ritual is still on because a lot of people are still wearing masks. Unfortunately, they are. And we've talked about how they're wearing masks in, how do we say this? The public performance media space. So I would say again that we're looking at January one more time as another chapter in the Janus ritual. And that's when the nodes change. That's when they go from Gemini to Taurus and Sagittarius to Scorpio. So what you're looking at behind me is an image, a visage of the new tribalism that is going to emerge as a result of the over technology. There's a word I'm looking for in my head. I don't want to butcher it, but it's when technology reaches a saturation point, when people can no longer begin to process the amount of information, the amount of options, and the amount of rapid alteration to their society. There will be a reaction to it, and you're looking at it right behind me. The new tribalism is going to emerge in 2022. When you look at 2022, it has the number 6. And 6 is a number that's associated with the feminine. And it's connected to things like villages and groups and families, right? So it's like your local community, it's your posse, it's your people. So this is going to be a very interesting time in 2022, because as we have the continued breakdown of the centralized systems in our lives, whether they're the supply chain or whether they're energy, whatever they are, there is going to be something else that's going to be emerging. And it's much closer to what's behind me than anything that you can order off of Amazon or any of the other technology companies that want to service you with your own little servo mechano slave. Okay. So have heart, people. Have heart. These are the faces and the images and the eyes of your future, of your past, and they're staring right at you to remind you where you're going and where you came from. For all intents and purposes, these could be the face of painted Druids. They could be the face of painted Native Americans. They could be the face of any painted ancient culture or civilization, but they're here to reemerge at this time to remind us of who we are, where we came from, and the things that were associated with the lives that we led during those periods of time. And if you've watched anything by John Levi or any of the people who've been doing deep dives into Tartaria, you know that those realms were anything but primitive. Those realms were sophisticated. They were technological. They were elegant. And they were earthy. because in many cases they had to work very closely with the elements of the earth, whether they were the water, whether it was the water connected to star forts, whether it was the etheric energy that was connected to Antiquitech, whether it was the very grid patterns of the earth itself laid out like a circuit board across the planet. They worked intimately with the forces of nature. And what we're dealing with now is we're dealing with groups that are working abjectly against the forces of nature, that they are putting together a synthetic world, and a synthetic world which they want to use to overwrite the script and the code of our analogic and biological world. And I said this on the great Nisha's show last week. We had a great jam in her show. And I said, do you know what net zero carbon means? And she said, yeah, we're going to have less people. I said, net zero carbon means there's no more organic universe. There's no more carbon universe, that the universe itself has been replaced by something synthetic, a replica. That's the goal. That is the audacity of the people that want to upend and overturn creation. So then we get into things like graphene oxide and the whole idea of black goo, which is becoming more and more of a conversation point. And one of the, we were talking about this today. So if you're kind of late to the graphene oxide, black goo thing, the story behind it is this, is that theoretically a planet in the Sirius star system exploded and it ejected pieces of it throughout the galaxy. And black pieces wound up here on this planet. And people who came in contact with these black stones changed and they became different. They were not the same people. Their motivations were different. Their thoughts were different. Their aspirations were different. And what we can piece together is that when they came in contact with this black stone, which ultimately becomes the black goo, they become the personification of evil. So people have linked this back to the archons, and that this is the Sapphic error, that this is the mistake, and that the archons are born out of contact with the black stone. And the black stone has been named, been called a number of different things. One of the things that the black stone has been associated with is something called the Chintamani stone. And the Chintamani stone is part of the same phenomenon, right? So if you look at all of the black cubes that are around the planet, and I know every single one of you who's watching this know exactly what I'm talking about, because you're up to speed. If you aren't familiar with it, if you're new to this stream, I will show you so that you can get a handle on it. And we'll show you all the black cubes that are present in our world. Let me just see this here. Hold on. Here we go. Yeah, you'll see them everywhere. These are homages to the Chintamani stone. Oh, look at this. A small Minnesota town is about to get the nation's first public satanic temple monument. When was that? How long ago was that? Isn't that cute? So here we go. Here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one. Probably a lot of them are the same. Some of them, here's one right here. Right? Gee, you ever wonder why? You ever wonder why they're all over the place? Yeah, that's Santa Ana, California, Manhattan, Denmark. So these are all homages. This is the Astro Cube, not the Astro Cube, but the Astro Cube. And they're representative of the black stone. And there's a lot of Saturn worship in these black cubes as well. But I believe this is what they're really getting at, or at least the reasonable facsimile. Of course, the big daddy of the black cube is right there, Mecca, which they moved. This was not always there. Now, supposedly, something along these lines is inside of the black box, right? Right there. Then you have the twin pillars, completely esoteric. Oh yeah, then you got these guys. They love to wear the old black cube on their third eye, right? So this black goo now supposedly has found its way inside of the jibber jabberoo, the old carjack. And it has supposedly found its way in there in the form of graphene oxide. And graphene oxide is a very interesting element. And of course, you'll find fact checkers who will say, nay, 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 this is not true. But you should let your own fingers do the walking. Graphene oxide is incredibly responsive to intelligence and intelligent, what's the word I'm looking for? Intelligent transmission, meaning that it can receive a frequency and it can do things. It can become assembled into different patterns. It can be actually tasked with doing various things based on a frequency pattern. So now we have 5G being set up all over the place. And what do you think is going to happen with people who have theoretically high degrees of graphene oxide inside of their body? Well, we can only begin to speculate. But the graphene oxide piece, which I believe is related to this, well, not this, this is something different, is again, the synthetic overwrite of our biology. So what's interesting when we get into the nodes, the true node, the ascending plane of the moon, is going to be in Taurus. The face is behind me, right there, right? Biological, analog, earth, body, tribal. That's what it's going to be about. Now, Scorpio, which is going to be in the south node, is a very, very interesting counterpoint in the inferior position. So when we think about Scorpio, we think about things like conception, because in astrology, the 8th house is a house of conception. Like you get together and you meet in the 7th house. Hi, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. How are you? I like you. You like me. I like you too. Oh, great. You want to go to bed? Yeah, let's go to bed. Let's go to the 8th house. And that's where you get busy, is in the 8th house. So you have the 8th house experience. And then what happens? Bloop, you get a physical form, and it's in the 2nd house, the body. That's how those two houses work. Right there. Boom. You get your first breath, the ascendant. You got your astrological identification code based on your birth time. And then you occupy a physical body. And that's your 2nd house experience, right? And by the way, the 2nd house is very informative when it comes to your early years. So you can look at your 2nd house and you can see what shapes your early years as a 2nd house. Whatever's there, whatever's on your cusp, whatever planets are in your 2nd house, that will shape your early years. Guaranteed. And another little factoid about the 2nd house as it relates to physical manifestation and physical values and security is that when we come into the chart, and if you take my astrology course, you'd find out about this. When you come into the chart, you take your first breath and boom, right? You get your assignment. You also get a physical body. But then what happens? Like when you're young and you're in that first house, all you do is whatever you want to do. You want to cry, you cry. You want to laugh, you laugh. You want to shit, you shit. And somebody's there to, take care of it, right? You don't have to worry about it. Somebody else is going to do it. Usually, first house, it's all about volition and will. Very simple. I want to go roll over there. I'll go roll over there. Or if you're a graphene oxide baby, it's like if you want to start speaking in French and your native language is English, well, I guess that's on your scorecard or your playbook. Anyway, but that's what happens. Now, we begin to separate ourselves from that as we occupy our bodies and we move into the second house, which again is related to Taurus and physical values. So the first thing that demarcates us in that way is bowel control. And once you learn how to control your bowels, you are no longer in volition of the will, because the volition of the will is I'll just do anything I want. I'll shit, I'll piss, I'll laugh, I'll cry, whatever. But once you are potty trained and you have control of your bowels, now you're in the second house and it separates you out, right? Now you are part of something else. Your awareness is part of something else. Your awareness is more than just you doing whatever the fuck you want. Your awareness is, well, if I don't do this, I'm going to make a big mess of my pants, right? And somebody may yell at me or whatever. So this is a really big moment in time, astrologically and psychologically, because, and by the way, like with the second house, one's relationship with toilet training plays a big role with how they deal with security for the rest of their lives. It's true. It could be overcome just like anything else. But if you're somebody who, constantly wet the bed or, wet your pants at school or, had a hard time, really dealing with your bowel control, there was something there, like you were not ready to let go of your primary relationship or something that was at home that was keeping you from feeling safe and secure in some ways. So I've told this story before, but a lot of you probably knew, but I'll tell it again. Sometimes I get away with telling stories more than once. So one time, this is one of my first, you can only get away with this when you were a kid, by the way. When you were really a little kid. So when I was in nursery school, I think it was kindergarten. It was kindergarten, but the kindergarten was at this nursery school. I think kindergarten was about as high as you could get in this nursery school. It was called Happy Hall. And that's where I went to kindergarten nursery school. And I remember like going to the bathroom and then wiping my bum. And I wasn't sure I'd done it right. So I got this kid and I said, hey, can you tell me if I'm clean, if I got it all? So I bent over and then I opened my butt cheeks for him to look at. And he went down there and looked at it. I said, yeah, you're good. You're good. Oh, thanks. I'm like, it was, you can only get away with that when you're a kid. You try that now, it'd be a little weird, right? But it was one of those moments, right? There was a second house moment. And it sounds like funny, but it was one of those things where it was like, there was no judgment. And who knows, man, if I picked the wrong kid, who the fuck knows what happened? But I picked the right kid and he was cool. He was like Inspector Clouseau, thumbs up, buddy. So, move on. But the 8th house is where all the conception takes place. And when we talk about the 8th house, we talk about not just conception and sex, but we talk about biology. We talk about our legacy, our physical legacy, Our genetic legacy, when I say physical legacy, it's like if your father, your mother, or your grandmother, your grandfather leaves you a house, or they leave you some money. That's an eighth house thing, right? They say, oh, we're going to give Mary Sue a house, and it's in the will, and Mary Sue gets a house. That's an eighth house thing. That's part of it. Or let's say Joe gets I don't know, quarter share of the family business or something like that, or half the share, 51% of the family business. That's an eighth house thing. But then there's other pieces of the eighth house that are different, and they're connected to things like your genetic code and the legacy of your forefathers and foremothers as well. So you can look at the eighth house and you can kind of get a sense as to what you're dealing with in terms of your genetic inheritance. The eighth house will give you some real insight into that area. And if you've got planets in the eighth house, you can dive into those planets and you can look at them and try to understand, you know, what the validity of the, so for me, I've got a lot of Cancer in my eighth house. So part of what I've had to deal with in terms of, you know, my own family legacy are very, very Cancerian issues. And especially around things like homes. Like my parents, when they grew up, the thing that I inherited from them, they had very shaky home lives. My father was always moving around. And consequently, I think I've moved about 50 times. And my mother didn't move as much, but the conditions of her home were very primitive, very, very primitive. They had this is 20th century, and they're like fucking pumping well water, and they're going to the bathroom in a shed. And this is not in the deep South. This is in New Jersey. So their home life was very, very primitive in a lot of ways, and a lot of kids. So not a lot of Cancerian stuff, and a lot of like, you know. So I that's part of my inheritance, especially through the mother's side, my mother's side, with Cancer stuff. And I've got other things in my eighth house as well. My vertex is there. I've got Mars there. So I have a lot of interesting things that I'm dealing with in terms of not just my immediate parents, but going back through the lineage of the biology of this body in this lifetime. The 12th house will give you some insight into that as well. But let's just take this from the sexual perspective and the biological perspective and the altering of sex, which we'll be going through. When we get into Pluto and Aquarius, babies will not be born the way they're born now. I can tell you that right now. And the kids that will be born, you're just seeing the first wave of them that are starting to come through. Like just wait. You know, there are going to be other kids, you know, third jab, fourth jab, who knows if they bring out another carjackaroo, how it's going to affect them. I mean, we're uncharted territory here, ladies and gentlemen. This is the synthetic biology moving into the eighth house, getting into the genetic code. And then what comes out in the second house is going to be very, very different. So we're seeing this now. We're seeing this Taurus, Scorpio, true node, south node. It's almost as if when you get into Scorpio and you get into the eighth house and you start, you know, mixing and matching with genetic codes, and you start mixing and matching with these different variants that are inside of these technologies that they've concocted for our well-being, you're messing with the forces of nature. Okay, that's what they're doing. They're messing with the forces of nature. They are trying to do a supernatural overwrite of the genetic code. And they're doing that by employing this or a relative of this, so that the future human is more synthetic than analog. And that the idea is to replace everything with the synth, Now, when I say analog, I'm not talking about analog as in an organic analog. I'm using the word analog as in analogous, a synth analog for the carbon-based world we're living in. That's what they want. That is net zero carbon. That means no more carbon. Kaput. Gone. See you later, carbon-based life form. That's what they're talking about, okay? And when we get into the South Node in Scorpio and the True Node in Taurus, it will be a battle. And it won't be a battle for truth versus freedom, although that's, or truth versus illusion, or freedom versus enslavement. I mean, those things will be part of the script. They'll be part of the script. The real battle is going to be nature versus anti-nature. That's the front lines. And that's where all of this is headed. And that's why you are looking at the future and the past, staring right back at you. Now, the audacity of the people that want to be able to do this is tremendous. It's absolutely tremendous because they believe that they can overwrite the entire script of the universe. They themselves can play God, that they can rule over a domain of antimatter. And that's what this is all about. Not going to happen. Now, it may upset the balance of things to a point where we can become fairly catastrophic or close to it, but it's not going to happen. I can tell you that right now. It's not going to happen. And the reason why it's not going to happen is because the creator of the universe is actually greater than the sub-creators or the imposters, the thieves of creation, and knows exactly what they're up to, right? If you think about it, omniscient, omnipresent, discovering itself along the way, but also forecasting into probable futures, possible past, it's all there. So knows what's happening. Yeah. And as these things occur, right, and as the human genome is hacked, and as they get into the 8th house and they find the back doors, the vulnerability, first of the human psyche, because that's how they get in. You know, the human psyche is just like a Microsoft computer, which gets hacked quite easily. What happens is you have this little virus, it's a fake little virus. You go and you attack the fake little virus, and then the real virus comes in while you're attacking the fake virus. So we got this virus, right? And everybody's going after that. Well, the real virus, nobody's paying attention to. And the real virus is something completely different than this thing that lays you up for X amount of days and supposedly gets you into the hospital and you got to get intubated. No, that's just kind of the covert application of the real virus. The real virus is a genetic virus. That's what it is. So they get people all up in arms on it, right? And so they have a lot of different things going on. There's that. Of course, we have a lot of the survival stuff. You know, that's another thing with the True Node in Taurus. Going to be a lot of first chakra issues, man. Like you get right down in there into Taurus, like the first house, second house. That's going to be intense stuff. And people that's already happened. I mean, once they started to go through this ritual, they were putting people right down into their first house because people were afraid. They were afraid of dying. They were afraid of getting sick. They're afraid of getting too close to people. Right? It was just fear. Let's just, cleanse our hands and let's cleanse our face and let's cleanse our bungholes. And we'll do that. And if we do all that, then, we'll be safe. But, I'll do that. And well, if you do that, then I'll be safe too. So you better do that as well. If you don't do that, well, then I'm not going to be as safe. I mean, that is so fucking first chakra. People are so afraid. They're just totally afraid. And now it's coming down to, well, just guess what? You're going to have to get it. And if you don't get it, you're not going to be able to keep your job. So you better get it. And then you get people that are getting it. And guess what? They get it. They really get it. And once they've got it, they get it. And they ain't got it anymore. They don't have it anymore. They don't have any job. They don't have a lot. So But that's it now. You better get it, or else you're not going to have it. Where does that take people? Right in their first chakra. And they get frightened. They get terrified. They don't know what to do. Many people are alone. They're out on an island. They don't have anybody to talk to. Most people are in a fucking trance. Most people have taken, most people have swallowed the dark sacrament, unfortunately. And being able to speak with them in a rational way is almost nearly impossible. And then when you have somebody like Andrew Wiggins, whom I do feel sorry for, by the way, who did not have the strength nor the support nor the fortitude to be able to say, you know what, I've made over $100 million in my career. And after taxes, I've got about $50 million. I think I'm good. I think I'm good. And when he said that, I had to ask myself, what kind of world are we living in? And what kind of world does he live in? Where how much is enough? Or, you know, I mean, that guy, I really want to like and wrap my arm around Andrew Wiggins, but I can't now because he's been carjacked. But if he just had fucking gone in his car, like get in your fucking car and just go. Let's see, you're in San Francisco, where could you go? It's still kind of go to Richmond, okay? Just go across the bridge, get in your car, go to Richmond. Go drive through Richmond and ask yourself how much you really need. How much do you really need? Those are the questions that I would have asked. Not, hey, why are you choosing not to do this? Oh, don't you feel like you're letting your teammates down? No, the real question is, hey man, how much do you really need? How much have you made in this game? You talk about generational wealth. Well, I want to create generational wealth. By the way, does generational wealth really, is it really good for people? I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure generational wealth is really good for people. It's fine if you have generational wealth and generational responsibility and generational accountability and generational morals and generational values, so that when the generational wealth kicks in, they know what to do with the generational wealth. But if they don't have that, then generational wealth can be an absolute and utter disaster in somebody's life. And I'm sure some of you know people who've had trust funds and had money and just blown the fuck out of it. Like they've done, it's like, gee, I wish I would have had some of that money. I might have been able to do a little bit better with it. He's talking about $50 million. That's what he's made after taxes. I looked it up. How much generational wealth does he fucking need? Jesus, I'm sorry. I hope the guy turns out okay. I hope he's healthy. Yeah, whatever. You know, that's a first chakra thing. And that, to me, that's a mind-blowing first chakra thing. It's like, oh yeah, I got to do this because, well, I guess I don't know my body. I guess it was just like, it was just such a Piscean thing to do. He's a Pisces. I guess I don't know my body. I'll wave the red. Go ahead. I hope I'm okay in 10 years. He said that. I hope I'm okay in 10 years. Well, I can't play basketball. Well, who the fuck says you have to play basketball, dude? It's like you've made $100 million fucking dollars. And let's be honest, you haven't really, lit the world on fire. You've been an okay player. If anything, people have chastised you for not being better than you theoretically were coming out of college. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to judge your athletic ability. We're all different. That's the first chakra. And everybody's got a different first chakra, pull, right? So you've got the second house right down there in your first chakra. And then you could say that the eighth house is your second chakra, because that's where, that's where all the fun starts. No, it's the fun is all over the place, right? But the second chakra is the hot chakra. Actually, one time I was going through, how shall we say, a rather sexually frustrated period of my life. And I did a song called Hot Second Chakra. Maybe I'll play it before the night goes out. It's kind of funny. Anyway, but that's what they're doing. They're getting into that south node now, and they're going to hack it. They're hacking the south node. And they want to hack the biology. And they also want to hack not just the biology, but it's also the lineage. It's cutting you off from your ancestors. Like when you take on the synthetic biology, you no longer share the same traits as your ancestors do. Like Clyde Lewis and I were talking yesterday, and he was talking about this idea of year zero. And year zero really, like if you go back and and again, you can have any kind of belief system you want, all right? But there was a time where it was like AD and BC. And there was that year, right? Year zero. And it was after the death of Christ that there was a new time. And it was the Piscean age. And we were talking about this new idea of year zero, which would be this idea of the Aquarian age. And if you, as an individual, have had your biology altered by synthetic means, that means that you no longer share the same biological, analogical traits as your ancestors. Now, we all know that over the last 25, 30, 40 years, our biome has been hacked, right? Our biome has been hacked by any number of different things. So we would have permutations. It wouldn't be the same biome as it was, say, 500 years ago. It wouldn't. It would be different. But there would be enough similarities, enough carrier genes from going way back to the very first time that your ancestors decided to become conscious, right? Yeah, your ancestors too. That's changed now. If you have gone through the cycle of, that's what I'm looking for, reanimation. If you've gone through the cycle of reanimation, you do not share the same genetic code that your ancestors did. Now, a long time ago, I started talking about that the idea, and again, if you are religious, okay, we'll play the religious thing here for a moment. If you're religious, or even if you're spiritual, that the idea that Jesus died on the cross, right? There were some things that happened. Number one, through that time, right, the blood of Jesus permeates the affairs of man, so that everything as a result of the crucifixion is now encoded with the blood of Jesus, meaning that the Christ consciousness is in all and through all as a result of that quote unquote blood sacrifice. Now, when I looked at it and thought about it, how I inferred it was that when that event happened, and you could say didn't happen or there was no such person, but for the sake of argument here, just go with me, okay? That when it did happen, that everything changed, that the vibration of the planet, that everything was encoded with Christ consciousness, the rocks, the little yellow cats, the blades of grass, you, the molecules of air, the leaves on a tree, everything was encoded with the Christ consciousness, which separated this planet from any other planet or any other domain in our solar system and creation. That was the game changer, right? In my estimation. Theoretically, why? Because it was happening consciously. It was a conscious act to do something that would completely and utterly change the cosmic molecular structure of the order of this planet. Now, where we are and where we've been, and this really started to get into my head around the whole spraying the sky stuff, is the overwrite, is that they want to overwrite that. They want to overwrite that consciousness through everything. Genetically modify the foods, genetically modify the people, genetically modify the water, genetically modify the air, right? Genetically modify the pets in the zoo, right? That's what they want to do. They want to overwrite that code so that that code is no longer living and breathing as a vibrational entity or a vibrational agent in our, or vibrational agency in the experience of our creation. That's the plan. And then you bring in the GO, and that's a whole nother level. That is just a whole nother level. It's like, okay, let's create this synth, this synthetic representation of the planet in no more biological, analogical creation. That's the goal. That is the goal. And when we get into the nodes, we're going to see that. We're going to see that. We're going to see these extreme polarities start to address themselves. And you'll see the new tribalism versus the new scientism. It's going to be very interesting. Isn't that right? So one of the things that we were talking about the other day also is, this is on Nisha's show, and I brought this up, and it's been something I've been thinking about over the last couple of weeks. And again, it kind of gets into this world of Taurus and world of the body. And it has to do with melanin versus graphene oxide. And as most of you know, melanin is, just by looking at me, something I probably lack serious qualities of, or quantities of rather. But melanin is a pigmentation. And it's the higher the concentration of melanin, of course, the darker the skin, right? So what you have is you have this group of people who are what, about 74% non-vaccinated? And what do they all have in common? Super high melanin. Now they have the reasons, and they're very, very good reasons, by the way. I'm not going to elaborate them. They're their reasons. And, we've been told not to question the reasons of other people or other cultures or other races because they're their reasons. And guess what? I'm going to respect that. I'm going to respect that those are their reasons. So I'm not going to question them. I'm fine with their reasons. And that's 74%. That's a pretty big number versus 26%. Isn't that interesting? So now we have this group of people who are highly melanated. And then what do they have? They have these injections that are filled with this very, very, very small particulate of imitation melanin, graphene oxide. And so now here we go. Now we're into, again, the analog and the synth, and the analog and the synth, and the analog and the synth. This is very interesting shit. I'm telling you right now. And we're just getting into it, right? We are just getting into this minefield of ideology and biology and sociology and theoretical rights. And hold on to your hats. This is going to be a hell of a time. We're going to see things. We're going to see the actual battle for not just the United States and the free world, but the entire freaking planet, the solar system, the universe. It's all happening. It's all here. You've got a front row seat. And when we move into these nodes, true node in Taurus and the south node in Scorpio, it is going to be a fucking rocket ride. They're fixed signs. We're moving into fixed signs. And those fixed signs, of course, are going to have a relationship with Uranus. in Taurus. So we're going to have Uranus eventually catching up with that true node. That's going to be really interesting. Really, really interesting. And we're going to have the Saturn squares to both of them as we go through Saturn. And, you know, I think Pluto, let's see, Pluto gets into Aquarius at the end of 2023. I think the nodes have moved on by then. But we're going to have Saturn, we'll have Uranus during that period. And it's going to be intense. Now, the other thing that we looked at during the, so we're going kind of going over some of the highlights with the great conversation with Nish, is the Sabian symbol for, I think it's 29 Scorpio. And I'm going to bring that up. It's really interesting. It's right here. So we could just call like 30 Scorpio 0 Sag, okay? We're gonna call that 0 Sag because the next one over would be 1 Sag. We're gonna call that 0 Sag, even though it's 30 Scorpio, because there are really no 30 degrees, there's 29 degrees. We're gonna call that 0 Sag. But this is 29 Scorpio. So when the nodes shift, right, they're going to go into the Cancerian degrees, the Cancerian decan. And this is 29 Scorpio. So let's just go with 0 Sag, right, to 29 Scorpio. This is the first node, the first south node that we encounter. An Indian squaw pleading to the chief for the lives of her children. Isn't that an interesting symbol? Love as a principle of redemption. Here the soul is presented as a mother whose sons, i.e. her active energies, have become disruptive forces in the collective life of the tribe. Well, this is to me, this is Rudier's interpretation. I have another interpretation of this, but that's okay. She seeks to counteract the karma of their misdeeds through her love and implorations. See, the thing about Rudyard is he doesn't know. Fuck, he doesn't know. It could have been like a new chief, right? It could have been like, oh, we've just conquered your tribe. We've conquered your tribe, and we've got you, and we got your kids. And I might just kill your kids. He doesn't grasp that, though. He thinks the kids have done something wrong. It's okay. The soul is responsive to the experience of unity, the spiritual king or chief. But the energies of human nature often follow their self-seeking, divisive tendencies. This is the fourth symbol, the 48th sequence. It presents to us, with the value of prayer, the principle of wholeness in man, the soul, acts to offset or attenuate the dictates of karma. In a religious sense, Mary the Mother is seen as the mediatrix in constant acts of intercession for the sake of waylaid individuals. So he's trying to kind of overlay this kind of Christian Western ideal of Mary. So you're imploring to Mary, oh, Mary, can you please help my son? You know, he's a drunken meth head. Can you please help him out? That's what he's talking about. I think it's a really interesting symbol, especially based on where we are currently. Because if you're a mother and you're like imploring to the chief for the life of your child, how does that translate into where we are now? Who is the chief now? Well, the chief now is the guy who makes the policy. Whoever is making the policy. It could be the chief surgeon. It could be the head of the hospital. It could be Tony Fauci, right? Whoever the chief is, whoever the person who has the power of life and death over your progeny, that's the chief in this situation. And the mother is imploring, please spare my child. What does that mean in terms of where we are collectively? What does that symbol translate into? It translates into a sense of helplessness. I can tell you that right now. And it translates into a sense of, well, where the fuck are the men? Right? But that's a very powerful symbol. That's the beginning of the South Node in Scorpio. And that's where we're headed in January. And that symbol kicks it all off. She's imploring to the chief to save her children, to spare her children. And again, it's tribal. It's a tribal symbol. You know, we're dealing with this tribal reality. Things are going to get very real. Very, very real. We've been living within the comfort of our own evolutionary process for a while now. And comfort's not a bad thing. It's not terrible. You don't want to get too comfortable. Just don't want to be too destitute either. You want to be in a place where you can, you know, rest your head at night and feel like, you know, nobody's going to come in and rip your fucking heart out or something, right? I mean, that's important. You also want to be able to get up in the morning and think, you know what, I can pay that bill. I mean, that's important too. Those are things that add to one's comfort, basic comfort. There's nothing wrong with that. And now for a lot of people, those things are really in jeopardy. So that's the first degree when the nodes shift into 29 Scorpio. Very interesting stuff. And I could certainly see that there would, because they just keep lowering, right? They keep lowering the age of consent for that. They keep lowering it. And then it's like 6 months. This is what you get. And if you don't get it, you don't get out of here with your little squaw. I like the fact that we are entering into the true node in Taurus after all this hall of mirrors. And I like me some Gemini. Don't get me wrong. I think Gemini is really interesting. And this whole Gemini effect stuff and Prince and the Twin Cities and the Purple Revolution. I mean, I cut my teeth on that stuff, right? But I'm really looking forward to the true node in Taurus, where people get down, they get real. They're getting real, having real conversations, real connections. And it's going to be a pivotal time for us. These next 6 months are huge. Remember, Mars is behind the sun now. It's gone until springtime. And that's all about what's hidden, taking place behind the scenes. And I feel like this is going to be an interesting time for men. Okay. It's going to be an interesting time for men. See, be a man among men. When the sun emerges in Aries in the springtime, there is going to be a renewed men's movement. I'm telling you right now, it's going to happen. This is a gestation period between November and April. And when Mars comes whipping around, it comes back out in the sign of Aries, you're going to see men get involved in a way that you've never seen them before. This idea of toxic masculinity and, you know, putting men down and turning all men into predators. It's going to be a tsunami that's just going to completely inundate those kinds of claims. And guess what? It'll be good men, because men are figuring this out now. It's like, holy fuck, we are on the chopping block. We are on the hit parade, the hit list. We got to figure this out. So you have all these men now that are starting to have conversations with each other amongst themselves and say, look, I've got to change, you know, and I've got to start protecting people in my life. Well, I have to start protecting the generations that are coming. This is our duty. And we have fallen down on the fucking job. I'm telling you. And I'm not perfect, and I've at times I've done my best. And other times, I've tripped and fell, So we all live and we all learn along the way. But this is going to be an interesting time. So this is a gestation period. And I feel really strongly about when that Mars reemerges. Now, a lot is going to happen in between then, a lot behind the scenes. So these next 6 months, you got to hold it together, okay? You have to hold it together these next 6 months. Really, from November through May, you've got to just keep your shit together however you can. That's important. That's important because it feels like in May, April, the cavalry will come in. And the cavalry isn't anybody fucking special. They're not white hats. They're not our enlightened space brothers that are here to save us. No, it's going to be us. And we will have some generative force by that point in time. Just hang in there. Don't give up. And for the rest of us, right? This is the most important part. Like, we've got to help each other. There are times when you help people, there are people who have needed help for a long time and they're constantly needing help. Like, those are the people you have to really watch out for because they may need to help themselves. But there are times when people just need help. And we have to be able to be there for them, especially now. Whatever it is. And as long as it's not completely dysfunctional or completely enabling, we have to. We've been individuals for such a long time. I'm still doing my best to relearn this in my own life. And then we have to come together. Colors, races, religions, we have to come together. It's important. The destiny of the universe depends on us to do that. Not just the United States and the Constitution or the world, the fucking universe. Okay, it's big. It's big stuff. This is what we're up against. So we have to hang in there. And these next 6 months are going to be pretty trying. We've got 2 eclipses next year, 2 major eclipses, and in Taurus and Scorpio. Those will be big ones for sure. I have them up here. Where are we? Here we go. Yeah, these are the 2022 featured eclipses. We've got, there's 4. We have 2 solar, 2 lunar. So my bad. Let's look at them. So we have a partial solar on April 30th, kind of a minor eclipse. We have a total lunar eclipse on May 15th. This is an interesting one right here. South America, a lot of North America. And then we have another partial, this one's a solar. So we have 2 partial solar eclipses. And one is happening down here and the other is happening in the Northern Hemisphere, mostly Western Europe, by the way. And then we have another lunar eclipse, total lunar eclipse in November. And this one is kind of interesting because it's starting out here, right? And that's part of Russia, going all the way through China, down into New Zealand, Australia. And there's the Bering Strait, and really up through the U.S. The majority of this eclipse is going to be right up here in the Bering Strait region, coming down. So the energies here are moving up. Energies here are moving down with the lunar eclipse. And then this one will be very interesting for Europe. I think in 2022, the U.S. Escapes, I think, a lot of the intensity of the eclipse energy. Like, this lunar eclipse is really about South America and part of the eastern and southeastern part of the United States, right? That's about as close as we can get. And then we don't even have any total solar eclipses in 2022. So that's kind of interesting. I wanted to talk about Mercury retrograde. I want to give you an example of like one of the best fucking Mercury retrograde things I've ever seen. Okay, so I'm going to take you into Jason Whitlock's world. I really dig Jason Whitlock. So let's look him up. Let's see what we got here. If you want a textbook example of Mercury retrograde, you're going to get it right here. Right here. So I can find it. I don't want to play the whole show for you. I'm going to try this. This should give you some idea here. Give me 1 second. You know what? I got to go back. Hold on. I'm not going to do this thing justice. You just got to see it from start to finish. All right. Let me set the stage for you here. And this is one of the reasons why I think Jason Whitlock is almost required viewing right now, because of what he's talking about, who he's bringing on the show, and how he is articulating a distinct voice that is worth listening to. All right, let me see if I can play this. We get a little intro and hopefully we get into this Mercury retrograde stuff. All right, here we go.
Ow! Welcome to Fearless with Jason Whitlock. Happy Tuesday. And man, if you thought I was excited yesterday, Shamika was in studio with me. Now, I got twice the fun. Shamika Michelle is back, and she's joined by the smartest man on the show, Delano Squires, in from Washington, D.C. It's so great to have both of you here in studio. Uncle Jimmy, still recovering and doing well. Obviously, it takes two people to replace Uncle Jimmy. That's why Shamika and Delano are here. We have a awesome, fantastic show planned for you. Chad Prather, my Blaze TV colleague,
funny guy,
host of the Chad Prather Show, he's going to join us at the back end of the show and talk about his new book, Am I Crazy? You want to stick around for that. You're going to see a side of me in that engagement with Chad, because I love comedy, I love comedians. I believe that comedians and ministers are actually protectors of the truth and protectors of the realm, and they're letting us down. And so you're going to see the comedic side of me when we bring Chad Prather on. Steve Kim, my Asian brother from another mother, he's going to join us in about 30 minutes or so. Sage Steele is off air at ESPN. We'll talk about that with Steve Kim. Delano has written a column about redefining the word sellout, or redefining who we call a sellout. We asked the question on his column, Snoop Dogg or Clarence Thomas, Who's the Sellout? We'll get into that, but we're going to start by me starting a fire. You guys ready for this fire? You have fire retardant clothes on. Are you prepared for this?
I'm ready for it.
I'm ready.
I'm ready to be a little
Delano, what do you think about the boots Shamika's wearing? She's Nashville ready. Is that? Did you wear that specifically because you were in Nashville?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, very nice. All right, let me start this fire. See if I can get this blaze going. If they ever make a movie about NASCAR driver Bubba Wallace, it should be called Greased Lying. It would be the perfect follow-up to the 1977 biopic Greased Lightning, which dramatized the life and times of Wendell Scott, the first black race car driver.
Okay, so first of all, it's Mercury because he's talking about race car drivers, right? Mercury cruising around, and he's talking about two guys right here, Bubba Wallace and Wendell Scott. So we have Mercury, ruler of Gemini, and he's talking about the two of them. Let's keep going.
To win a NASCAR event. According to corporate media, Bubba Wallace made history yesterday when NASCAR officials canceled the final 71 laps of a race at Talladega Superspeedway because of rain. Wallace, while sitting in his pit hoping the race would be called, became the second ambiguously black man to win the highest level of stock car racing. This momentous occasion was documented by the Associated Press, the New York Times, and ESPN as if it were the equivalent of Jackie Robinson's first at bat for the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1947. Let me quote from the Associated Press story. With a crowd gathered behind the pit, standing, chanting its support, one man told his 6-year-old son, clad in a Wallace shirt and jumping up and down along the fence, that he was witnessing history. No, what we're all witnessing is a distortion of history. Corporate media wants us to believe Bubba Wallace is Wendell Scott and that 2021 is 1963.
Okay, so he's doing a whole Mercury retrograde thing here, right? He's talking about how 1963, theoretically, there's big racial issues in America, which he's even going to disprove, by the way. But what they're trying to do is reanimate the fact that where we are now, that Bubba Wallace is going through the same kinds of struggles, trials, and tribulations that Wendell Scott went through, and Jason Whitlock is going to prove them wrong. This is, and I'm going to do a part 2 here. As soon as I lay down the foundation, you're going to see a beautiful Mercury retrograde in action.
Let me try another movie analogy. Bubba Wallace is Marty McFly, starring in Half Black to the Future. The media believes Bubba's stock car transports him to the 1950s and 60s, where his half-black status would make him controversial and polarizing. It doesn't. And even if it did, Bubba would be shocked at what he found in that long ago era of racing. Wendell Scott was a publicity stunt. Born and raised in Danville, Virginia, Scott got his shot as a race car driver because the Danville Speedway had trouble drawing crowds. A smart promoter, recognizing the popularity boost integration gave Major League Baseball, decided he needed a black driver to increase attendance and drive media attention. Scott was an infamous bootleg whiskey driver in the area and was light-skinned enough to not spark a full-on KKK rally. Comedian Richard Pryor played the role of Scott in the movie Greased Lightning. Comedian John C. Reilly would have been a better choice. Reilly looks like one of Scott's 7 children.
So you see all the Gemini going on here? We've got time, present, past, Mercury, race car drivers, Black to the Future, Marty McFly. We've got this strange connection here, who, by the way, John C. Reilly was in Talladega Nights, right? So this is a complete kind of Mercury retrograde, sort of like cyclotron moment here. It's going to get better when I get to part 2.
Whatever. Scott started his driving career on the Dixie Circuit, a regional rival to NASCAR. Scott became the Dixie Circuit's top attraction. His white competitors initially tried to kill him on the track, ruthlessly bumping his car, but over time, his competitors came to respect him, his skill, and the courage he showed. Southern newspapers fell in love with Scott and the racial narrative. They began writing favorable articles. Eventually, as most capitalist organizations do, NASCAR decided to cash in on the Wendell Scott phenomenon. Bill France's organization reluctantly granted Scott a license in the mid-1950s. In 1963, Scott won a race in Jacksonville, Florida. Track officials ruled that a white driver, Buck Baker, won the race. 2 hours later, track officials determined they made a clerical error and that Scott won the race by 2 laps. NASCAR waited 2 years before officially awarding Scott the victory.
This is all like layered and stacked Mercury retrograde. The other guy wins, and then the other guy wins. 2 hours, time lapse, and then a couple of years later, he gets a trip. This is all Mercury retrograde stuff, right? Total Mercury retrograde. Let's keep going.
Wendell Scott faced real bigotry, discrimination, and hardship. Corporate media wants you to believe nothing has changed and that Bubba Wallace is reliving Scott's life in 2021. It's just not true. Scott raced as a gimmick on a shoestring budget. Bubba Wallace has been previously backed by the king of racing, Richard Petty, the man Wendell Scott passed to win the 1963 race. Wallace is now backed by Michael Jordan and McDonald's, arguably the 2 biggest brands in America. Modern corporate media refuses to tell America's story of racial progress. Worse, it's distorting the past and trying to make it worse.
So corporations are ruled by Capricorn, right? Capricorn rules time. And what we're seeing corporations do is rewrite the timeline. They're rewriting the timeline. They're turning our current situation into Selma in the 1960s. Okay, this is the continued commercialization of a condition that allows corporate America to virtue signal in a way that is obscene. But it also has to do with this timeline. They're trying to reinvent this timeline. They're trying to bring this other timeline that existed prior to 1965 when the War on Poverty by Lyndon Baines Johnson was initiated. These are all events that led to the War on Poverty and the Civil Rights Movement. Well, why are they doing that? Because they want to do something very similar. They want to do a whole other thing based on the same kind of momentum and velocity, socially, racially, economically, that was going on during that time. They're just taking the same elements from that period, moving them forward and trying to insert them into this timeline so that we could have another moment where a Johnson-like character or president resets the economic table. This is what's happening. Corporate America is engaged in a Saturnian mutation of the timeline by promoting the virtue signaling aspects of almost every single portion of our society. A lot of people say, well, this is cultural Marxism. It has something more to do than just cultural Marxism. It's about creating an entirely new timeline. Eradicating the past, completely eradicating. Like, they're not even remembering this guy, Wendell Scott. This is the new one. This is exactly what Jason is saying. All right, so stay with me here.
Look at this excerpt from the Associated Press story on Bubba Wallace. Wallace is the first black driver to win at the top level of elite stock car racing since Wendell Scott in 1963. a race in which he wasn't declared the victor until long after Buck Baker had already been awarded the trophy. NASCAR at last presented Scott's family with his trophy from the race 2 months ago. This is Grease's line. It's an intentional misrepresentation of fact. Someone unfamiliar with Scott's history could easily conclude after reading that passage that NASCAR waited 57 years to recognize Scott's victory. NASCAR waited 2 hours. The organization waited 2 years before updating its official records. As for the trophy presentation at Scott's family, that was just another modern-day publicity stunt done to capitalize on all the meaningless George Floyd-inspired racial publicity stunts sanctioned by corporate America. Pretending America is trapped in a racist Groundhog Day is the mainstream media's #1 grift.
That's exactly what I'm talking about here. We're talking about the Saturnian timeline, and he says that we're trapped in this racist Groundhog Day. And he's right to a certain extent, but what they're doing is they're eradicating the past, they're rewriting it, bringing parts of the past into the present so that the future will be based on social events that took place after 1963, 1964, 1965. The Great Society, the War on Poverty, completely remaking the entire socioeconomic structure of the United States and the Western world. By the way, Richard Nixon does not go off the gold standard and does not create the petrodollar if Johnson doesn't do what he does with the Great Society and the War on Poverty. He actually had to do that as an economic answer to the hemorrhaging that was going to cause the United States for decades to come. All right, I'm going to keep going here.
Scott faced seething hostility on the racetrack and had a victory stolen from him. When it comes to Wallace, today's media believes that a knot on a garage door rope that Wallace never saw is the equivalent of what Scott experienced. From the Associated Press story from yesterday. In June 2020, at Talladega, NASCAR discovered a noose in the garage stall assigned to Wallace. The finding came just a week after NASCAR blamed the Confederate flag or banned the Confederate flag at its events at Wallace's urging. But wait for it. The AP's next sentence renders the previous paragraph pointless. Quote, the AP wrote this. The FBI investigated and found that the noose was tied at the end of a garage door pull and had been there for months, meaning Wallace was not a victim of a hate crime. If he wasn't a victim of a hate crime, why bring it up in a story yesterday in promotion of Bubba Wallace?
Absolutely. And the reason why is because all of these events and all these stories, whether they're intentional or not, are designed to recreate and shift the timeline. And that timeline is 1963, 64, post JFK, United States, and the Great Society with LBJ and the Great War on Poverty, and all of these social factors leading into that. This is why they're doing it, because this is also connected to the quote unquote Great Reset. And now we're not just talking about the United States, but we're talking about the entire world in general. Okay, so what I want to do is I think it's the October 7th show. And I want to go back and look at the October 7th show. Let me just give me a second here so I can find it. Now just stay with me. Here we go. All right, so this is what I wanted to play. Now, here's what happens. Wendell Scott's grandson comes after Jason Whitlock. And then Jason Whitlock has this writer for the AP come after him. And what he does here is another masterful textbook illustration of Mercury retrograde. Watch what happens here.
Stuck you with it.
And I'm stuck with it.
All right.
Yeah.
So you're not the first Leonidas in your family.
That's right.
All right, so Leonidas Johnson's here. He's gonna help me with this fire I'm about to start. But we also have, it's Wednesday. You guys know that means it's Tennessee Harmony. It's Harmony Wednesday. Pastor Bobby Harrington came up with another excuse not to be here. But who needs him when we have Pastor Anthony Walker? We're gonna talk with Anthony about Urban Meyer. And Urban Meyer not living up to all of his Christian values as we saw in the past week. And so we'll get into that. We'll get a biblical perspective from Pastor Anthony Walker. But also a little bit later in the show, or before Pastor Walker, we're going to welcome in Tim Barton, the president of Wall Builders. You know what? Where we're going to start, and Leonidas, I hope you have some fire retardant clothes on because I'm about to start a fire. I'm going to restart the fire that I started yesterday about Bubba Wallace, because people had the nerve to try to come at me out on these Twitter streets. And that is one of the biggest mistakes you could make. So let's get into it. Jenna Fryer, the Associated Press's motorsports writer. She desperately wants Bubba Wallace to be the second coming of.
Okay, so here we go. Again, True Note and Gemini. We have these two race car drivers, fairly light-skinned, mixed, Mercury retrograde. We're going back in time. We're looking at Wendell Scott. They're trying to give him the same kind of shine that Wendell Scott had, because Wendell Scott won the first NASCAR race by the first quote unquote Black American driver. Okay, just keep that in mind now. And this woman, Jenna Fryer, has come after Jason. And here is where the Mercury retrograde really kicks in a good way.
Wendell Scott, the first Black driver to win a NASCAR race. So do many of the descendants of Scott, the primary benefactors of the Wendell Scott Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit established to commemorate Scott's legacy and employ Scott's descendants. Yesterday, in reaction to my column exploring corporate media's obsession with pretending Wallace faces 1950s style anti-Black bigotry, Fryer and Warwick Scott Sr., a grandson of the deceased driver, criticized my column over social media. In a since deleted tweet, Fryer called my opinion piece a literal hot take. She then claimed I was unqualified to write it because I've never personally interviewed Bubba Wallace and because she's seen Bubba Wallace need security, seen convoys of Confederate flags, heard the deafening boos. Warwick Scott, the founder of the Wendell Scott Foundation, called me a clown in one tweet and challenged me to talk face-to-face in another one, writing, quote, "You're the first Black man that I have ever known to disrespect and disregard my grandfather's legacy in such a manner. Instead of me ripping you to pieces on Twitter, how about a face-to-face opportunity to discuss?" Well, I've extended Warwick Scott an invitation to discuss the matter right here on Fearless with Jason Whitlock. He asked me to DM him. I DM'd him. He hasn't responded. He's not here as of yet. Maybe it'll happen tomorrow. Maybe it'll happen the next day. I don't know. But I would like for Warwick, Jenna, and everyone to listen to me right here, restating and clarifying my point of view on Bubba, Wendell, and corporate media's obsession with transporting Blacks to the future, AKA pretending that 2021 America is really no different from 1961 America.
Timeline.
This false narrative is done for profit and harms modern race relations. The false narrative relies on an intentional, blatant distortion of fact, truth, and reality. Jenna Fryer, Bubba Wallace, and Warwick Scott all financially benefit from the promotion of the false narrative that Wallace is racing in an environment similar to the one Wendell Scott competed in 60 years ago. Let me take a moment here and establish some context. The Associated Press is America's primary news source and the world's foundational source for news about the United States. The AP presents America to the rest of the planet. It is the most powerful news source in America. It's 100 times more influential than Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC. The AP dwarfs the New York Times' impact and influence. All of those news sources rely on the AP's content. Although unknown, Jenna Fryer determines how the world views Bubba Wallace, NASCAR, and America's race fans. Her work is the foundation for all other news sources. ESPN ran her story on Wallace at the top of its website. Fryer and the AP decided to wrap Wallace's rain-shortened victory in the Yellowwood 500 in a racial narrative. They decided to present it as a historic moment. These narratives are chosen by the media, by the TV networks, by the leagues in need of historic moments to boost ratings. As I wrote yesterday, Wendell Scott got his chance to race on the Dixie Circuit in 1951 because a smart promoter realized the best way to attract fans to the speedway in Danville, Virginia, was to have a black driver compete against white men. Wendell's popularity on the Dixie Circuit inspired NASCAR to let him race. America has changed for the better. The country is far less racist than it was in the 1950s and 60s. The American media has not changed for the better. The media is far more sinister, subversive, and clandestine with its racism than it was 60 years ago. Corporate media is the wolf in a black female sheep's clothing. Let's examine how the AP and Jenna Fryer handled Wendell Scott's narrative and Bubba Wallace's. Fryer and her editors intentionally chose to present Scott's 1963 victory in Jacksonville and Wallace's victory on Monday in the most racially polarizing and divisive way. Fryer's Tuesday story included this paragraph. Wallace is the first black driver to win at the top level of the elite stock car race series since Wendell Scott in 1963, a race in which he wasn't declared the victor until long after Buck Baker had already been awarded the trophy. NASCAR at last presented Scott's family with his trophy from that race 2 months ago. That's what Jenna Fryer wrote. The paragraph clearly insinuates that NASCAR waited more than 50 years to recognize Scott as the winner of the race. It's an intentional distortion. It's what we like to call a white liberal lie, used to trigger people emotionally. Here's the truth about what happened to Wendell Scott in 1963. It was written in the Jacksonville newspaper in 2010. I quote, the guy won the race in Jacksonville. The newspaper in Jacksonville wrote about it in 2010. Here are the facts according to the people at ground zero of Wendell Scott's victory. It took 2 hours, long after the fans left the Jacksonville track, before NASCAR upheld a protest by Wendell Scott. Racing rival Buck Baker originally was declared the winner. He took the checkered flag. NASCAR then poured through its handwritten scorecards and agreed that Scott actually drove 2 extra laps. Official records now show him 2 laps ahead of the field. Scott eventually was declared the winner and received the first place winner's check. He also received a trophy, not the original, 4 weeks later before a race in Savannah, Georgia. Those are the facts. published in the Jacksonville newspaper for everybody to see. If she's the alleged motorsports expert, I'm unqualified to talk about this. But I can hunt down the facts better than Jenna Fryer. This is intentional distortion.
Okay. The reason I'm showing you that is that that's a Mercury retrograde moment. She just went out there and she virtue signaled this thing because that's what they're being told to do. It took Jason probably less than an hour to find that, the real story. And she is distorting it. And I'm going to tell you why they want to distort this thing and why this has been in motion really since Obama was in office. Let's keep going.
This is intentionally done to trigger people emotionally along racial lines. This is done to divide us. The AP is America's news source to the world. Jenna Fryer is sloppy. Her editors are sloppy. They're doing this intentionally. They're doing it at the behest of China. They're compromised. This is fake news. You should go read the entire Jacksonville article. Scott and Buck Baker were actually friends. Baker sold Scott the first car Scott ever raced. At the time of Scott's victory, it was commonplace in the 1960s for there to be scoring discrepancies. It happened all the time. Scott's victory wasn't a big deal because only a couple of the races even mattered at that time. NASCAR wasn't a big deal then. This is all detailed 10 years ago, 11 years ago in the Jacksonville newspaper. Go read it for yourself. It's not hard to find. Send the damn article to Jenna Fryer and the editors at the AP. You don't need to be Inspector Clouseau to find this stuff out. You just gotta not want to be race baiting 24/7, 365 for relevancy. Jenna Fryer's Tuesday story also stated that NASCAR didn't give Scott's family a trophy until 2 months ago. That ain't true either. There's a story from 2010 in the Jacksonville newspaper about the Jacksonville Stock Car Racing Hall of Fame and NASCAR presenting Scott's descendants with a trophy. It was a 45-minute ceremony. So let's go to the final scorecard here. Let's check the judge's scorecard for the final tally. For what Wendell Scott, for a single victory in 1963, Scott received the winner's paycheck, a trophy in Savannah, Georgia, 4 weeks later. When he died, his family got a trophy and a ceremony in Jacksonville. And just 2 months ago, his family got a third trophy and ceremony from NASCAR. Wendell Scott is in several Hall of Fames, and his grandson is employed by a foundation dedicated to promoting Scott's legacy. Wendell Scott, I mean, my God, how much better treatment could you get than what he's got? I mean, Lord have, he won one race. Just think about this. This would be the same, and it sounds like I'm denigrating him, but I'm not. I'm just trying to put this whole thing in perspective. He won one race. This would be the equivalent of the first black boxer at any weight class or heavyweight class, whatever, the first one to beat a white fighter. Oh my God, he won a pro fight. He didn't win the heavyweight title. He just won a fight. Wendell Scott isn't Jack Johnson, the first black heavyweight boxing champion. Wendell Scott isn't Jackie Robinson, the first black Major League Baseball player, a 6-time All-Star, winner of the National League MVP award in 1949, a World Series champion in 1955. Wendell Scott isn't Althea Gibson, the first black to win the Wimbledon tennis tournament. Wendell Scott isn't George Coleman Poe, the first black American to win an Olympic medal. I'm not trying to denigrate Wendell. From everything I've read and learned about him, he was a man without ego, an extremely hard worker, someone his family and peers respected. He got his start in racing as a promotional tour for the Dixie Circuit and later NASCAR. Bubba Wallace is the new promotional tool. Like Scott, Bubba isn't Tiger Woods or Michael Jordan or Muhammad Ali. He's not an all-time great. He's not better than his competitors. In order to make him appear better, Jenna Fryer and the Associated Press have created the appearance that he's overcoming the KKK, the Proud Boys, Trump supporters, insurrectionists, the descendants of Jefferson Davis, Jason Whitlock, and everybody damn else. Fryer wrote this morning, Wednesday morning, about the garage door rope knot that Wallace never saw. She insists on calling it a noose, and yes, it looks like a noose. It's a freaking knot. She complained that people on Twitter sent Wallace mean tweets. She lamented the fact that some race fans boo Wallace. Booing, tweets, ropes on a garage door are the equivalent of cross burnings, lynchings, and fire hoses? It's all fake news. It's stirring racial animus for profit. Everybody wins. Jenna Fryer, Warwick Scott, Bubba Wallace, NASCAR, the Associated Press, and all of America's adversaries, all the people in China, the CCP, all the people that want to see this country burn to the ground. They all win. They get to continue to stir this racial animus for no reason with this fake race news, and they all win. Jenna Fryer becomes more popular. She gets to pretend like she's covering 1950s America, and she's out on the front line, taking on everybody that hates Bubba Wallace. Bubba Wallace's grandson, he's sitting there right now. We're looking at the donations to the Wendell Scott Foundation. Roll in. Bubba Wallace makes Wendell Scott relevant. And so he's all into that. NASCAR wins. They've been doing this forever. This is what capitalists do. Whatever it takes to draw a crowd, sell tickets, draw attention, whatever, they will do. And so Wendell Scott, we can't draw fans at the Danville Speedway in the 1950s. Let's find a black dude to come in here and race against these white dudes. And I got no problem with Wendell Scott or the promoter in Danville doing that. But that's all. This is just business. This is, no one here, Martin Luther King and those guys, they were the courageous people out fighting for racial equality. Wendell Scott was a bootleg whiskey driver who got an opportunity to race cars for some money. He loved it. Eventually, his peers loved him and respected him. I read a bunch of stories from guys from back then. But Buck Baker's son, Buddy Baker, went on to become a NASCAR. Buck Baker and Wendell Scott were friends. We're reshaping all this history, and oh my God, it was Mississippi burning everywhere that Wendell Scott went. And no one, 60 years later, no one wants to give him credit. They gave the man a paycheck, 3 different trophies, 2 different ceremonies, and it still ain't enough for Warwick Scott and these people who are living off of their dead grandfather. That's their claim to fame. You know what I did? I was the grandson of Wendell Scott. That's your calling card. Cut it out.
All right. That's why Jason Whitlock is relevant, okay? He's totally relevant. And from a Mercury retrograde standpoint, what did he do? He balanced that situation out. Mercury starts retrograding in Libra, right? That's where it starts. So he's trying to bring some balance to the imbalanced reporting. He's going back in time and he's looking at the facts. And again, it's Mercury. So we're dealing with race car drivers, movement, motion. We're talking about the AP, which is again, Mercury, Gemini, journalism, the written word. Brilliant. But what he's really showing here is this continued reshaping of the timeline and turning these events from the past that didn't even really exist in the way that they actually happened, more in the way that they're being portrayed through the rear view lens so that people now can somehow piggyback on the injustice and the misfortune of other people during other times, which didn't even really happen. That is shaping the timeline. That is the corporate timeline, Saturnian timeline that is being shaped and remolded. Why? Remember, when this happened during the 1960s, 63, 64, 65, we had Lyndon Baines Johnson, the war on poverty, post-Kennedy, right? The Great Society. And now, where do they want to go? They want to take this into reparations. That's the next iteration. It's reparations, the Great Reset, obviously at the top of it all, but reparations. Now, what do you think is going to happen if we blend in the reparation piece? This is where this is headed. They're trying to recreate that timeline so that they can have this new social economy, right? That's what's happening. So what happens if they say, well, geez, you know, there are 74% of Black Americans who have decided that they're not really that interested in altering their DNA. What if they tie it to reparations? Interesting, right? Is that going to be a part of the discussion in 2022? South Node in Scorpio, other people's money, quite possible. That's why they're doing all of this. That's why they're trying to make Wendell Scott relevant. That's why they're trying to turn Bubba Wallace into an oppressed, an even more oppressed version of Wendell Scott ever was, so that they can build a case for this timeline and what they want to do with the social economy moving forward. One man's interpretation here. Also linked to the Pluto return to the United States, which is still up for grabs, way up for grabs. I was going to talk about October 15th. I actually talked about it on my Thursday show. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a separate video from that. I'm going to put it on this channel. So if you're interested in October 15th and some of what I think are the astrological implications of October 15th, which I think the odds are probably the release of some other contagion, quite possibly, during that time. But I talk about that during the video. Anyway, I'll put that up. It'll be up before October 15th. That's for sure. Well, thank you for joining me tonight. And a little bit of a different show. But a show nonetheless that I think you probably got some value out of. We talked about the nodes. We talked about this idea of Taurus and Scorpio and procreation and genetics and the genetic code and tribalism and real humans versus transhumans. We had a really great segment there with Jason Whitlock, really just breaking down a brilliant excavation of Mercury retrograde and how it's really supposed to work and to bring balance into the situation. And then the potential of this retelling of these stories so they can reanimate that timeline. And by reanimating that timeline, again, from a corporate perspective, what do we get? We get the new version of the Great Society, the war on poverty, and that usually will result itself in, at least in this timeline, with reparations. That's where it's all headed. Okay, let me see what's going on with you guys in your world, which is Chattaria. And if you like tonight's show, hit the like button. And we'll be back at this tomorrow on Monday, 15 Minutes of Flame. Did the chart of the moment show in Jasper. We did not do the chart of the moment. You know, sometimes you just got to change things up a little bit, you know? You just got to change things. I mean, every Sunday night I go and I look at it, we go the week ahead, but you know, you can't be robotic all the time. We'll get back to it next week. I'd love to know about the North Node and Taurus, crypto, digital. Yeah, that's a real interesting one now, isn't it? That's a very, because the South Node is other people's money. I mean, look, if you're looking at the South Node and Scorpio and kind of funny money, because when I think of cryptocurrency, you don't really have to fucking work very hard for cryptocurrency. I mean, look, you may have to you watch over your algorithms or follow some kind of a crypto witch on YouTube, and you might get some insight. But let's face it, you don't really have to work very fucking hard, do you? That's Scorpio. Scorpio is not working hard. Scorpio is about the invocation of magic and the intentionality of the will. It's about magnetic attraction. When you have the South Node in Scorpio, that stuff becomes way more volatile. And I think harder assets are going to be worth more. We're talking gold, we're talking silver, we're talking land, we're talking food, we're talking bullets, we're talking things that have a physical value. Okay, physical value has a commodity. What's the word I'm looking for? Commodity intensity. Commodity intensity in 2022. So if you have cryptocurrency, look, it's good to have some on the side. I think there are basically 4 cryptos that you pretty much want to bank on and pay attention to. I'm no expert, but if I was going to put money, I mean, you could play around with Shiba, maybe Thor, Rune, some of those, lesser coins. You get your little kickback on Theta Fuel. But I think if you're really in it for the long haul with crypto, it's going to be Ethereum, Bitcoin, XRP, and Cardano. Those are your 4. And the reason why XRP and Cardano are private coins, Ethereum seems to be the transfer bridge between one coin and another coin. And Bitcoin, there's just so much of it at this point in time. And a lot of people who are seriously invested in Bitcoin have huge amounts of it. Those are the 4 I'd pay attention to. Other than that, I'd look at physical assets. That's where the true node is. I'm just saying. Okay, take good care. On Friday, we'll be doing the Friday Forecast from the Hill Country right here. And we're going to have a great group of people. Jay Widener will be here on Saturday. That's not going to be live into the public. Sharon Rose will be here. She'll be doing her thing, not live into the public, although we may release that later. But we will have the Friday Forecast on Friday. Saturday night, we're going to be doing a conspiracy cocktail with Emily, so you'll be able to participate in that. It's going to be super cool. Misaki will be beaming in live from Los Angeles with a soundtrack. So there are ways which you can be able to touch base with us and connect with us during this upcoming weekend. All right, love you all. Use your head in order to discern what's real. Your heart to stay open to what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Thanks for being here tonight. It's been a real blast.